Sorry for the interruption. Yeah. His Excellency Achal Malhotra, he is a famous author and foreign policy commentator, and he was India's ambassador to Armenia and Georgia and deputy permanent representative of India to UN and international organization in Vienna. He delivers lectures on foreign policies at universities under Ministry of External Affairs. Distinguished lecture series program also participates on the TV panel discussions on the foreign policies issues and issues of international relations. So it's really wonderful, sir, and thank you for joining in the panel today. We are very thankful. This is Self and His Excellency Fiodor. He's the ambassador of IOD to Moldova. His Excellency Fiodor is the ambassador and resident representative to Republic of Moldova and Ukraine and head of regional representatives of the IOD in Republic of Moldova, Ukraine, Romania, Belarus, Bulgaria, and Turkey. He is the chairman of commissions of the Public Council of the President of the Republic of Moldova, and he's the chairman of Economic Council of the Mayor of Chisinau. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining in for the panel discussion today. We are really honored to have your presence. We have Dr. Mohammad G. Kafafy. He is the President, Global University of Science and Technology. He's also, in December 2010, Dr. Mohammad Kafafy received the US President Award from the Corporation of National Services, that's the CNCS. With over 20 years of experience, he offers both an academic and practical approach to engineering and business management. Through his operational and managerial experience in different industries as an educator, trainer, consultant of several academic and professional bodies all around the world. So thank you very much, sir. It's really a pleasure to have you here today with us. Then we have Dr. V.D. Abraham. He's a former Vice Chancellor, Venkateshwar University, and Brigadier Dr. V.D. Abraham, Sana Medal. He's gallantry Sana Medal, very illustrious record. He's a doctorate from Jawaharlal Nehru Technical University, Hyderabad, and was the former Vice Chancellor of Venkateshwar University, UP. He has served as a brigadier in Indian Army, electronics and mechanical engineers being there. And he's also served as a Dean of Faculty of Instrumentation Technology, Army Engineering College at Vadodara, Gujarat. He had the coveted appointment of ADC to Governor J&K. It's really wonderful, sir. We are really honored to have you here with us today and listen to your comments. We have Lieutenant General Anil Malik. He is a seasoned professional with 44 years of diverse and dedicated experience in HR development, administration, training, education, and healthcare management. He has vast international exposure, planned and conducted joint training with US and Singapore armies, responsible for defense cooperation with Russia and Eurasian countries. He is the chief advisor to Zambian Defense Forces, responsible for training of defense officers of South African Defense Council countries. Thank you, sir. It's really pleasure to have you here today with us and listen to you. We have Major General S B Asthana, SM, VSM, and he's a former diplomat and foreign policy commentator. He's globally acknowledged, well-known TV personality, strategic and security analyst who has authored over 400 publications. He's a veteran infantry general with 40 years of defense experience at national and international level. Held various key appointments in Army and UN during the military career, awarded twice by the President of India and twice by UN and CEE Excellence Awards for Nation Building by Governor of Haryana. What a wonderful, sir, to have you here with us today. And we have Major General K Saighal, a very prominent personality on the TV today for the strategic discussions. He's a pilot and a deep sea diver who retired from as a head of Army Air Defense College. He is a trained officer. He has trained officers of several armies at Army War College. He was honored by Dr. Abdul Kalam and Shri Ravi Shankar. He has been a frequent TEDx speaker. And sir, you were told that given 7 TEDx speeches, really wonderful. And he has appeared regularly on the TV of External Affairs Distinguished Lecture Series program. Also participates in TV panel discussions on foreign policy issues and issues of international dimensions. It's really wonderful to have you all here with us today and discuss on this particular very pertinent topic, which is, catching all the eyeballs, catching the point of discussion all across the world, because it is what is going to define how we are going to be in the next few years, because the Russian and the Ukraine standoff is really a point of concern for everyone across the world. So with this, I now hand over the panel to give the points on the various topics and give their views. Firstly, I'll request, because I understand His Excellency Chiril Gaburici has to go somewhere, I will request you to give your comments and opening remarks so that, we are able to have your views. And if you have to go, sir, then it will be our pleasure that we listen to you before you leave. His Excellency Gaburici.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. Good day, Excellencies. I would like to actually to thank all of you for participating at this event. First of all, thank you to Mr. Sharma that he accepted the idea. I think it's very important for these kind of institutions to be clear in their voice, to be clear in their statements of supporting the peace and supporting the dialogue among all the parts of the different type of conflicts. We are in Moldova. In Moldova, Moldova is a country located very close to, in a neighborhood of Ukraine, and is very close to this potential conflict. And we as Moldovans, as neighbors of this area, we do not want to imagine that there can be, it's not only about Ukraine, not only about in Ukraine. We cannot imagine that there can be any military conflict. Through the human history course, leaders were using the wars to expand their territories, or in some of the cases to strengthen their power. Most of the leaders were very certain about their victory, but every single war had winners on one side and losers on another side. And the leaders were not the ones paying the immense price. What is the price for a war? These are, I would call it, destroyed lives, lost lives, destroyed cities, or I would call them wiped out countries in some of the cases. I'm very happy that in the actual times, the leaders are using the so-called security architecture. And this is something that indicates to all of us that the leaders are concentrated. First of all, they acknowledge the borders. And second, they are concentrated on the safety of their people or their population. The big powers now, they have new military capacities, and this is something that determines the new security structure, forming the new security structure. No matter, in my opinion, what are the arguments for the conflict should never be an acceptable option. The only viable option, in my opinion, is finding a compromise, because this is something that would save lives for the future and for the present populations. This will save cities, as I was mentioning above, and this will save countries. And I believe that understanding of these effects should be something that motivates the participants to move to a dialogue, to move to something that would exclude the military conflict. The actual leaders, they have to remember that their main mission is to protect their people. The country trusts the leaders and trust to them, I would say, their life, their security, and therefore every single decision made by a leader should be oriented towards its population, population security, and population's well-being. But of course, there is something to mention, that the security of a country should not be based on insecurity of another country. To create a sustainable architecture of security, there is a need of a lot of knowledge and a lot of responsibility. And I believe that today's leader, they have this wisdom and they have the necessary characteristics to solve it in a proper way. And the message that I would like to give is that it's very clear that the earth is the home for all of us, and no man-made borders can change this universal truth, that the earth is one and we have to learn to live together. I truly hope that mankind is moving closer to be as one, the earth as one, as a society as one, and the borders in the near future will have another meaning. If I think about what would be the world in the next 40 to 50 years, I can see it as a united society. I can see it that we all live together in order to solve some other issues or other problems. We are talking from time to time about global warming. We talk about the pollution of the air, water, land, and so on. We talk about the problems related to these tons and tons of waste all over the world. And these should be the problems that we should be focused on. These should be the problems that the leaders of the world should be focused on. And they should be the ones spending their energy into solving these issues as a priority number one, I would say. Everything should be based on communication. Everything should be based on a dialogue, and everything should be based on the goodwill to solve these conflicts. And that's what this kind of organization, the organization that we are acting and supporting, and we are now under IOED leading, this should be the organization. These organizations should be the ones telling and spreading all over the world what should be the normal path of this kind of conflicts. So you should be able to have the dialogue, you should be able to talk, to communicate, and to find a compromise. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very pertinent point. And, there's always whenever there's a war, there's a winner and a loser. And the damage which is there is the population which gets damaged, the global scenario gets changed. And it's a kind of situation where we cannot go in and have a war at this point in time when, the world order itself is changing and there's so much stuff happening in the world because of COVID and, everybody fighting back to get to the normalcy. So I think, and IOED is playing the major role as a think tank for these really aspects of it. So thank you very much for your valuable input, sir. Yes, sir.
The health situation is on top of whatever I mentioned over there. So being in the situation when a lot of people are passing away, are dying because of COVID, that should be also something we should be focused on. So my simple message is that this kind of conflict should be solved with a goodwill for peace, with a goodwill to find a compromise, and we should be able to focus our energy towards solving the biggest world problem, knowing and acknowledging that the world is one, the earth is one, and we have to learn to live together on this earth. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And the message of the peace and the world is one is really wonderful. I think everybody has to follow that. Your words of wisdom are really very good for us and carrying forward the discussion. I will, request His Excellency Achal Malhotra to give your viewpoints, sir, as to what are the main reasons behind the ongoing Russian, Ukraine conflict. How do you look at it, and what's the way forward on that, sir? His Excellency Achal Malhotra, I think if you can speak, sir. You're on mute. You're on mute, sir. I'll try and unmute you. Let me just see. No, I can't.
Is it? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, sir.
Okay. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, very, very good afternoon. Indeed, today the world community is witnessing one of the most serious conflicts of the century, if I may say so. And if you ask me to look into or dig into the root causes of this conflict, I think this is essentially a result of the tug of war for influence in a very important area, which we call the post-Soviet space. As we all know that USSR disintegrated in 1991, which resulted in the creation of 15 successor states. And the Russian Federation happens to be one of the largest and the most powerful, the former Soviet state. Now, right from the beginning, there has been a tug of war for influence in this very important region, which is geopolitically and strategically a very important location. So the whole thing, as you all know, that for the first 10 years or so after the disintegration of the USSR, Russia was not really, they were struggling to find a place, a foothold for themselves with the domestically and also in the international relations. And they were not able to assert themselves. But ever since the advent of President Putin in 2000, has adopted a little aggressive kind of approach. And they whether right or wrong, what they claim is that the post-Soviet state, that is all the former Soviet republics, and the former Warsaw Pact countries are supposed to be their natural, the area of their natural influence. And NATO, the Americans and their NATO allies should refrain and should not make any efforts to encroach upon this territory. Particularly, they are upset over the eastward, as they call it, eastward expansion of NATO. And we know that since 1991, NATO has included as many as 14 more countries, many from this region, as part of their allies. And this, according to Russia, is threatening to their security, and they are not, this situation is not acceptable to them. If you look at it from the point of view of the Americans and the Europeans, they looked at the opportunity offered by the disintegration of the USSR and moved into this region for at least 2 or 3 reasons. One, of course, was the ideological reason. They thought they should do anything and everything possible so as to make communism as irreversible, irreturnable. This region should not revert to communism as an ideology. So they wanted this region to adopt the values which are cherished and pursued by the Western world, democracy, rule of law, things like that, as per their own definition of these values. Therefore, this was one of the reasons. And of course, there were economic reasons, because countries like Azerbaijan, they are very rich in natural gas and oil and other resources. And of course, the geopolitically and strategic location, Black Sea and all that. So for all these reasons, they wanted to have a foothold, a strong foothold in this region. So this conflict has been simmering. I take you back to the year 2008, when NATO announced that Georgia and Ukraine will be members of NATO, although they did not specify the date. So this is something which enraged Russia. And the net result was, this announcement was made in April 2008. And in August 2008, we had a Russia-Georgia war. And Russia went ahead and recognized the breakaway regions of Georgia, which is Abkhazia and South Ossetia. And 6 years later, in 2014, Russia went ahead and annex Crimea as a part of this, the ongoing process. So now where do we stand today? There are many basic fundamental questions which need to be answered. Now, all these post-Soviet republics of the countries of the former Warsaw Pact, they are all independent sovereign countries. So don't they have a sovereign right to decide whether they want to be a part of an alliance or not, or what kind of a foreign policy they should pursue, what kind of economic policies they should be pursuing? That's from the perspective, say, of Ukraine in the current context, and all former Soviet republics, be they from Central Asia, be they from the Baltic, from wherever. That applies to each and every country in the world. Then the second issue that is from the perspective of Russia, the Russian Federation. So can they allow a situation when their own security is threatened, or there is a perceived threat to their security? So these are issues which are very, very difficult, and in today's context, the whole the conflict resolves around this issue. If you look at the demands which Russia has made on the Western world, a non-starter, of course, because he wants guarantees from NATO that Ukraine and other former Soviet republics will not be admitted into NATO, or NATO should revert back to certain positions. These are non-starters. So currently, in my assessment, the phase that we are going through is very alarming. We are having saber rattling at one side of the spectrum. Russia is putting pressure on NATO. NATO is putting pressure on Russia by sending troops, military assistance. Russia is amassing troops, doing exercises in Belarus and circling Ukraine. So this is saber rattling which is going on one part of it. On the other side, there is a flurry of diplomatic activity which is taking place. My only observation is that this is not the final observation that I want to make is that this is not an ordinary conflict. And if it flares up, the implications will be there not only for Ukraine, for the rest of the Europe, but for the entire world. And the results are going to be devastating. And my second observation is that we should all work together in such a manner that ultimately diplomacy and dialogue prevail. We must understand that wars begin when the diplomacy fails, but we must also understand that ceasefires are achieved through diplomacy, and the post-war solutions are also found through diplomacy. So in this context also, I would like to conclude by expressing my hope and wish that this turns out to be a passing phase in the context of the history of international relations, and we are able to find a solution via media where the concerns, the security concerns, the political concerns of all concerned sides are met to their satisfaction. Thank you very much.
Agreed, sir, and very nicely you brought it out that there are major challenges with this kind of conflict. We just can't let it happen. It's a kind of a situation where it's going to be very difficult for everyone. Thank you for your wonderful thoughts, sir. Moving on, I will request His Excellency Fiodor to unmute yourself and give your comments on the conflict itself, sir. What are your views on it, sir? His Excellency Fiodor.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for your speech. Now I would like to say that Mr. Fiodor Ghelici would like to take the floor, if you don't mind, gentlemen. So I will be interpreting his words.
Sure,
right?
that will be a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Федор Васильевич, вам слово. Включите звук, вас не слышно.
Алло, слышно меня?
Да, отлично.
Во-первых, я очень всех рад видеть.
I'm very happy to see you all at this conference.
Хочу поблагодарить лично президента Арвинд Кумар Шарма за столь важный вопрос для обсуждения.
I would like to thank a lot the president for such an important speech and for such a discussion.
Вопрос Украины и России – это вопрос и мой личный.
The question about the relationship between the Ukraine and Russia is my personal question, I can say so.
Я украинец по национальности,
I am Ukrainian by nationality,
и мои предки из Украины.
and my parents come from the Ukraine.
Я провел очень тщательный опрос с гражданами Украины, будучи на самой Украине.
When I was in the Ukraine, I made an opinion poll in the Ukraine among the inhabitants of that country.
Что они думают о конфликте между Украиной и Россией?
What do they think about the conflict between the Ukraine and Russia?
Скажу вам на жизненном примере.
I will give you a vivid example about it.
Жил отец, у которого
Once there lived
было
a
два
father
сына.
who had two sons.
Один старший и
The
другой
elder
младший.
son and the younger one.
Жили в мире и
They
дружбе,
used to live in peace and friendship
потому что оба сына от одного отца и от одной матери.
because both sons had the same father and the same mother.
Перед смертью отец решил поделить землю между сыновьями.
Before he died, the father decided to share his land lot between the two sons.
Поделил землю старшему брату и младшему брату.
He shared it for both the elder and the younger son.
Провел границу между ними.
And he made a border between the two land lots.
После этого отец умер.
Then he died.
Братья жили вместе по соседству более 20 лет.
The two brothers had been living next to each other for more than 20 years.
Но в один день
But one day,
младший брат решил еще и дружить с другими людьми.
the younger brother decided to make friends with other people.
Старшему брату это не понравилось,
The elder brother did not like it.
и он решил в одну ночь забор, границу передвинуть и забрать у младшего брата кусок земли.
And one night he decided to move the border and take away a part of his brother's land lot.
Между старшим и младшим братом возникла вражда.
And there was a conflict between the two brothers.
Однако младший брат не воевал против старшего.
But the younger brother did not want to be in war with his elder brother.
Увидев реакцию младшего брата, старший брат решил еще кусок земли забрать.
When the older brother saw that the younger one did not react properly, he decided to take another piece of his land.
Уважаемые друзья, это история
Dear friends, this story
семьи.
of a family
Такая же история, как между Россией и Украиной.
is similar to the story what happened between Russia and the Ukraine.
Ни украинский народ, ни русский народ не
Neither the
представляет,
Ukrainians nor Russians cannot imagine
что они могут между собой воевать
that they can be in war with each other
и убивать друг друга,
and kill each other,
потому что они дети одной матери и одного отца.
Because they are the children of the same mother and the same father.
Просто один старший сын живет в России,
The only thing is that the elder son lives in Russia,
младший брат
the
живет в
younger
Украине.
lives in the Ukraine.
Как вы себе представляете,
How
чтобы между
can you
ними
imagine that there can be
была война?
a war between them?
Россия, а я говорю о России, политиках, политиках
And
России,
Russia, I am talking about Russian politicians,
президент России,
the president of Russia,
чтобы сохранить свою власть,
to keep back his power,
аннексировал, забрал Крым
he annexed the
незаконно
Crimea
в Украине.
illegally from the Ukraine.
Украинцы не стали воевать с Россией.
The Ukrainian people didn't want to start a war with Russia.
И тогда
And then
видим безнаказанность, Россия вмешалась
then
и в
Russia,
Донбасс.
okay, being unpunished, she involved in Donbas region.
Теперь попробуйте ответить на мой вопрос.
Now try to answer my question.
Есть сегодня в Украине причина вооружаться против агрессии старшего брата?
Does the Ukraine have reasons to get armed against his elder brother?
Имеют ли они право защищать свою страну от агрессии старшего брата?
Do they have the right to protect their country against the aggression of the elder brother?
Я разговаривал с жителями Украины
I spoke to the Ukrainian people
и задал им очень простой вопрос.
and asked them a very simple question.
Если Россия нападет на Украину,
If Russia invades into the Ukraine,
пойдут ли они воевать против своих братьев?
will you go against their brother?
Был один ответ.
The question was always the same.
Мы больше не позволим, чтобы у нас отбирали землю.
We won't let anybody anymore to take our land away from us.
И поверьте мне,
And please
будут
believe
воевать
me,
все.
they will all go into a war.
И женщины, и дети, и старики.
All women, children, and older people.
Потому что старший брат
Because the elder brother
перешел все границы.
crossed all the possible borders.
Украина хочет жить
The Ukraine
И-
wants to live
по своим правилам.
in accordance with its own rules.
Они стремятся к европейской цивилизации.
They are trying to get connected to the European civilization.
Они хотят построить лучшую жизнь,
They
Чем
want to
та,
build
которая
up a
была-
better life than they used to have,
чем та, которая была у них вместе с Россией.
what they used to have together with Russia.
Они хотят жить с Россией в хороших отношениях, как с соседом.
They want to have good relationships with Russia, as if Russia were their neighbor,
Но они хотят идти своим путем.
but they want to have their own way.
И поэтому,
That
уважаемые
is
друзья,
why,
уважаемые
dear
коллеги,
friends and colleagues,
Мы должны остановить сегодня всем миром
We all
не русский
together
народ,
must stop not the Russian people,
а остановить политиков России.
but stop the Russian politicians.
Я вам скажу больше.
Moreover,
Если Путин как президент
if
посмеет,
Putin, as the Russian president,
значит,
dares
посмеет нарушить этот нельзя этот мир, хоть какой-то, но мир между
dares to
Украиной и
destroy
Россией,
this peace between Russia and the Ukraine,
то он погибнет вместе с украинским народом.
he will die together with the Ukrainian people.
И Путин прекрасно понимает, что если он начнет войну против Украины, он погибнет сам и вся его власть.
And Putin does realize if he starts a war with the Ukraine, he will die together with all his power and all his politicians.
Однозначно, имперскую политику России необходимо остановить.
In any case, the imperial politics of Russia should be stopped.
И мы все знаем, что
And
после
we all
развала
know
Советского Союза
that after the Soviet Union fell apart,
в республиках, которые были в составе Советского Союза,
the countries which used to be in the Soviet Union,
возникли конфликты.
there were plenty of conflicts in there.
В Молдове это Приднестровье,
In Moldova, it was Transnistria.
в Грузии Абхазия и Южная Осетия,
Abkhazia and South Ossetia in Georgia,
в Украине это Крым и Донбасс,
the Crimea and Donbas region in the Ukraine.
и это все дело рук имперской политики России.
And it's all the matter of the imperial politics of Russia.
Yeah, His Excellency, Fiodor, we'll come to the next round also. I think other panelists are there. We'll go to them and then come back to you, sir, if you permit.
Окей, сейчас нужно хочет передать слово другому участнику, а потом, если будет время, перейдем снова к вам, к вашему выступлению.
Спасибо всем за участие.
Thank you very much for
Thank you, sir.
participation. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come back to you again, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, thank
Федор
you,
Васильевич,
sir.
к вам еще вернемся, если останется время.
Thank you, sir. You have brought in your experience, the real pain point, what you had, and the people of Ukraine, the challenges, what are there, and what you brought out is the real heart story, and very, our heartfelt, feelings go to you. The way you brought it out, the way you expressed the challenges which are there. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, sir. It's really wonderful. I will move on. I will request Dr. V.D. Abraham to share your views, sir, on how you take the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and you have already brought out in your book, which you were telling me. It will be a real pleasure to hear from you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. If you see that this is a book which has been published, is Pilgrimage to Peace. This is basically touching upon all the types of conflicts all over existing. Basically, when I was giving a lecture for youth ambassadors for peace of the states, the consequence of there is, as far as me concerned, the word conflict doesn't arise between Russia and Ukraine, as His Excellency Fiodor has told. If at all you go further, what are the backgrounds? How it has come? His Excellency Achal Malhotra has mentioned about annexing of Crimea. I'll come back to that. He has also mentioned regarding the NATO conference in 2008. The catchword is Germany and other neighboring countries has said, please don't include these two, Georgia and Ukraine, in the NATO. However, the concluding session they announced about their inclusion without discussion. Basically, the hidden agenda of NATO of extending towards East is not acceptable to the neighboring countries of Russia. You know that Ukraine, as economically poor, and a lot of corrections. So initially, even the European Union declined their membership. The Ukraine was in friendship treaty with India by virtue of the strategic locations and because of what Fiodor has told brother-sister relations. There was no problem between them. However, when the Ukraine President Yanukovych declined the EU deal, the street clashes finally he flew away on 2014. If at all you see that number of casualty or during these clashes till from that year, very nominal. 2014, what he was mentioned, Excellency Achal Malhotra was mentioning that Russia not annexed, incorporated Crimea, and because Russia was having a friendship treaty and naval operation was in with Crimea. Can I have the next slide, sir? So basically, it is not, it's only differences. Now, basically, actually, forget about Ukrainian. There's no French, it's a conflict between them. It is basically what is going to have our present concern is we will going to have a further deteriorations of US and EU with Russia. Earlier days were different. 2000 onwards, Federation of Russia has developed himself and come back to the scenes. Russia's demand is only basically one thing. Why since NATO troops to be deployed near to USSR? It will only disturb this peace within. Even if it will, you see the Monroe Doctrine after Eastern Hemisphere, both the hemisphere is supposed to be independent of deployment, but we are not going ahead with this. Also, if it will see that East Ukrainian countries, cities like Donetsk and Luhansk, which are a pro-Russia activist, he already sought for independence. Now, the recent meeting of German Chancellor with US President, there is a threat coming even to Nord Stream Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline from Baltic Sea from Russia to Germany, costing out this much billion, and it's under threat. So basically, what I want is this: Ukraine should not turn out to be test bed to settle the difference of East and West. So they are peace-loving people. Only that they next slide, sir. Basically, also on today, the media, the wisdom propagating is first wisdom is the Putin is the main cause, is crazy or irrational. He wants to expand his because federations to earlier all the countries within this, but he's a great strategist. That's why he's remaining as president or in the helm of affairs from 2000 onwards, last 21 years, and brought up the nation into a very high esteem province. Second wisdom says, US is always as the big father, that's when in headman, seeking to promote the stability, ideologism, what Achal Malhotra sir has mentioned, and incorporate democracy promotions. It's totally false. Democracy only he looks forward, those who support West. Next, sir. I just come back to 3 points. The causes of conflicts of my personal view. What is the deep cause, precipitating cause, and Russian reactions will be as follows. The deep cause, aim of US and its EU to peel Ukraine away from Soviet orbit and incorporate into the West. The key element of this strategy, NATO's East expansion, EU's expansions, and fostering an orange revolutions. I'm not elaborating of any of things. It is very crystal clear if at all since you are prepared for it. Next, sir. Now the precipitating cause which has happened is 2014 coup, in which on President Yanukovych no to EU deal. Then subsequently Russia announces $15 billion on loan, street clashes, death, coup, and finally the president ran away. 2014 is incorporated Crimea into Russian Federation, in which if you take of it, there is no much of fight or any of the heartburns has not much. What the Russian response is on today, Crimea will remain as an integral part of, since it was a part of the naval base, and not to invade Ukraine learned after, because Russia has learned it, not only Russia, Israel, in every countries who says went to on a invasion. I have learned that invasion is not a solution, and but since because of the east and west of Ukrainian difference of pro and anti-Russia, they can wreck Ukraine into pieces. As on today, people know it vehemently that after deployment into the Russian borders, Russian army, maybe without uniforms, are working with the pro-Russians, and they can make they can disturb the peace of Ukraine. Ideal things, I'll come back to the solutions. Please, next slide, sir. My recommendation is create a neutral Ukraine as a buffer state between NATO and Russia. In NATO, nearest France, Germany, Poland, one side, Ukraine should be a buffer state, and Russia on the other side. Explicitly abandon NATO expansion into Ukraine. Fashion an economic rescue for Ukraine with Russia, and subsequently it is not only Ukraine, Russia, IMF as well as EU should help Ukraine to come back. And you see that the pro-Russians talk of Russian language, and the others rest of the portions in the West talk Ukraine language. We should guarantee a minority rights, especially in the language right of Ukraine. We all know that. It's a hub world for the world medical education. It should remain as a remain. That is the thing which we should look forward, and NATO should be put into place, and the problem will be resolved. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for so thoughtful, and the points which you brought out about the deep cause, the precipitation cause, and the Russian reaction are really very relevant to the study what you have done. It's so nice that you brought out the work which you've done in the book. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Now I'll move on to General Anil Malik to share your thoughts on the conflict and what do you think. Before that, I will request His Excellency Gaburici Chiril, because sir has to leave. Before that, I'll just 1 second, let me put in a spotlight as a token of appreciation from our side. I'll just share this. Just give me a second, sir.
Excellencies, do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, sir. Just 1 second. Give me a minute. Yes. As a token of appreciation, sir, this is a small token from our side for joining the webinar, giving your thoughts. And in fact, so nice of you to have shown us the way to have this kind of discussion at the international platform, IOED, and to give a vision to this kind of thought process. Thank you very much, sir. Before you leave, a couple of words before you go, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate and I'm honored to receive this appreciation from your side. I would like to thank to organizers and to all the speakers for sharing their thoughts and for doing their best to make a world a better place to live. I thank Mr. Kumar Sharma for your inspiration and for leading these discussions. It's very important. And I think it's very appropriate for IOED to come with this kind of discussion, to use the organization as a platform to collect the thinkings, to collect the thoughts, and to share them with the world. Thank you. I wish all of you a good discussions. I'm sorry that I have to leave, but I promise I'll listen to the recorded recordings of these conferences. Thank you. All the best to all of you.
Sir, and thank
Have
you
a nice
for
day.
joining, sir, out of your busy schedule. We really appreciate giving us the time, sir, and the vision for doing this kind of seminar. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Have a great day, sir.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
sir.
you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Going forward, I will request General Malik, sir, you can throw the light on the international organizations, how they are, such as EU, NATO, and UN. They play in trying to end this kind of crisis. So what's your perspective? What's your thought process on going forward?
Thank you, Colonel Inderjeet. First of all, I think the background has been very elaborately discussed, and I think Ambassador Malhotra has really given us the true dimension of why this whole issue comes about. We've also had the emotional feedback from the Ukraine representative, who brought out the true sentiment of the people. The people of that country want to be able to decide their own future. And the lovely story that he narrated makes us all look inwards as to how often we come across this kind of a situation. And I think we ourselves in India have similar background to talk about. So having said that, there are certain ground realities that we need to look at. The fact of the matter is that right from 1991, the Russians have always been smarting over the fact of their disintegration. We also understand that while in the initial period, they neither had the military muscle nor the wherewithal to stir any controversy. But as years passed by, and that's why when 14 states joined NATO, while there were disagreements, there were disgruntlement expressed, but no concrete action really came out. Now, as we are aware that as years have passed, Russia will want to get back onto its status. It does not want to be considered as a left out. They had been over the years started sending a clear signal to the United States that this is no more a superpower world. So that is one aspect that we need to look at. We are also well aware that any movement of NATO eastwards has always been a cause of resentment. And the reason is very obvious. The Crimean Crisis 2014, we all understand the basic cause to get back onto the Black Sea, the Russian naval fleet, the use of bases, Sevastopol. In fact, the Russians always claim that even in Soviet Union, Sevastopol was independently controlled by Moscow. And therefore, the loss of this region closes any options that the Russians had to get into the Mediterranean or to the Atlantic. The only opening that left for them was Vladivostok into the Pacific. So this was bound to happen. And what has happened is a cause of concern. We've all seen the last period from 2014 as how agreements, disagreements have come about. We are aware of the role international organizations, Colonel Inderjeet brought out, is very paramount. Now let's first look at who are the parties who could get involved. The first of these is the United Nations. Primary responsibility is that of the United Nations, founded for this very purpose. Now, have they been able to do anything, or do we see a future in what they're going to do in this crisis? With Russia having the veto, while the charter says that an interested party will not be allowed to vote. But the fact of the matter is that it's been happening all over again. Even when the United States went into the Middle East, there were occasions when they themselves were allowed to vote. The new dimension that has come about in the last 10 days is that of China. The understanding, the agreement, whether it's only a trade agreement of $117 billion worth of gas exchange, has strengthened the Russians further. So I don't see very much happening care of the United Nations. The next people who are involved, the European Union, there is a dissent amongst themselves. The European Union understands that opposition to what the Russians are doing will amount to economic problems for them. And the major thing there is the natural gas supply. We've seen how the previous Angela Merkel regime in Germany pushed for the Nord Stream 2 to be completed. They are facing ground realities. Economic sanctions, when brought about on Russia, would have an effect, but very, very partial effect, because the people in the European Union themselves are divided on whether such sanctions are really going to work. So also NATO. NATO themselves are not very clear. From 2008, when Ukraine applied to NATO for membership, as Ambassador Malhotra brought out, nothing has changed. There has always been resistance. Even today, France and Germany are in a position to allowing Ukraine, Georgia into the NATO forces. So there is a limit to what NATO can do. One very important organization, and that which was responsible for so far maintaining the ceasefire, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, has a very important role to play. They have a paramount role in ensuring that we look back at the Normandy format, we look at Minsk I, Minsk II declarations. The Ukrainians have never accepted it. But we need a framework, a position from where we can start work. Let me assure you that notwithstanding the sentiments, the patriotic fervor, any aggression, and I'm very sure that the Russians are not going to go in for an open aggression as show of force has been the saber rattling that is going on. The drills in Belarus officially conclude on the 20th of February. Let's see how what happens to the troops that have been deployed there. But the fact of the matter is, war is no solution. We are going to cause widespread disaster as far as Ukraine and the neighboring countries are concerned. Poland itself has been crying over the migrations that are going to take place, which have been forced upon them, and try and visualize if such a situation comes about in Ukraine. What the Russians could engineer is once again trying to bring about a divide. Eastern Ukraine, the Donbass area, people may be prompted to start some kind of a thing, create problems for the present Ukrainian regime, That's how things are going to be moving. It's not a story which is going to end in a week, 10 days. International organizations have to continue their pursuit, but it is individual countries like Germany has taken initiative, Russia, France, and though this is going to be discussed subsequently, but I think India have a very important role to play. India have a lot of leeway so far with Russia because of our heritage association. India also has a newfound love with the United States. The United States sees India as a bulwark against the Chinese in the Eastern Asia region. And therefore, India has the capability to bring about influence on both these countries to a large extent. So I would say that we need, the world collectively needs to put their heads together and prevent any kind of escalation taking place. The Europeans are concerned about natural gas, while Qatar has grown, but it still does not have the wherewithal to take care of the European interests. So their dependence on Russia is going to continue. And therefore, it's in everybody's interest to put their heads together to bring about a peaceful solution, resolve these issues. We are all aware, we've had these discussions earlier as to the legitimacy of the international law on Crimean crisis that took place. Russia was able to get around that by quoting that it was only done to protect their own people and by invitation. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of mutual treaties between Ukraine and the Russians were broken. But more on that when we talk about the... Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, and very insightful. And it's really, Ukrainian crisis is about a lot more than what we can think. It is potentially even the reconfiguration of the world if it happens. You know, that's what. And the tectonic plates of geopolitics are shifting, and where it ends, no one can predict with a certainty. And like you already brought it out, that how the international organizations are playing up, it's still very unknown. Starting from the NATO alliance itself, what role are they going to play? With this, I will move on. I will request General Saighal, sir, I will request you to give your views on India's position on this whole issue. General Saighal, sir.
Excellencies, esteemed panelists, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you, sir, perfectly.
Excellencies, esteemed panelists, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be speaking on one of the most critical issues confronting humankind at this point of time. Excellencies and other eminent panelists have already dealt with some of the most reasons for ongoing conflict as well as other allied issues. As per my perception, before I get on to India's viewpoint, there are many reasons for the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, some apparent and others not very apparent. The main reason is the existential threat that Russia perceives to itself because of the relentless eastward expansion of NATO in Central and Eastern Europe and strong US presence in Central Asia. Russia perceives that USA and NATO pose a potential threat to its underbelly because they have not only positioned troops in former Russian states, but have also deployed missiles and air defense arsenal as well. If Ukraine too was to join NATO, the threat would become absolutely unacceptable. Putin is demanding a permanent ban on Ukraine from joining the pact, besides other concessions. There are several additional reasons, some of which are Putin has made political capital out of armed conflict before. The war in Chechnya helped him ascend to presidency. The war in Georgia in 2008 marked the new anti-NATO nationalism. Seizing Crimea in 2014 was hugely popular at home. Mobilization along the border has generated a sense of crisis in Russia, and this has helped Putin shore up his regime. Putin has been in power for 22 years. Throughout this period, he has unsuccessfully sought an alliance with Ukraine. He feels the moment is opportune now because of internal divisions in USA and departure of Merkel. Large unexploited reserves of gas in Central Asia and under the Caspian Sea and their economic connotations. sense of insecurity in Putin, and falling popularity of Joe Biden. This is causing hardening of stance as neither wishes to appear weak. Ukraine, ladies and gentlemen, is the largest former Soviet republic in Europe. Since its independence in 1991, there have been several attempts by Russia for an alliance with it. In the meantime, 4 Australian members of Soviet Union on the borders of Russia have joined NATO. For Russia, Poland or Czech Republic joining NATO was not a big deal. But Ukraine is a very major concern. Putin strongly believes that Ukrainians and Russians are a single people, unified by language, culture, and religion. Whereas for US and NATO and its allies, NATO allies, an independent Ukraine would be indicative of Russia's terminal decline as a powerful empire. However, it is my firm belief that it would be a grave folly for the West to say finish to Russia's military potential. As far as NATO, UN, and European Union roles are concerned, UN Secretary General has appealed for calm and has said that there can be no alternative to diplomacy and dialogue. He has also stated that a military intervention by Russia or NATO must be averted at all costs. He has cautioned that any incursion by one state on another's territory would be against international law and the United Nations Charter. UN has also welcomed the diplomatic dialogues that are currently taking place and hopes that a successful de-escalation will strengthen peace and security in Europe. As far as European Union is concerned, countries of European Union, particularly France, Germany, and UK, have been trying to dissuade Russia from any aggressive action. Efforts are being made by President Macron of France, Prime Minister Boris Johnson of UK, as well as the German Chancellor towards this end. Regarding NATO, NATO has assured Russia that under no circumstances will it induct any combat troops in Ukraine. It will, however, continue to strengthen Ukraine's capability to defend itself against a possible attack. It is beefing up the defenses of member states in Russia's shadow to assuage their fears. It is also preparing to respond in 3 ways: deter Russia, keep talking, and prepare for the worst scenario of a Russian invasion. As far as America is concerned, as per my perception, the United States firmly believes that the best way to dissuade Russia from invading Ukraine is to be prepared for war and let Russia know that consequences of a conflict, however minor, would be catastrophic for her. America has also promised to help Europe secure more gas in case Putin decides to cut off or restrict supplies. Effect on Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, and others. The ongoing crisis is causing extreme nervousness amongst people of Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, and Estonia. They are already suffering the consequences of Russian cyber warfare, trade warfare, and information and psychological warfare leased against Ukraine. In all these countries, energy prices have already risen dramatically. Should a conflict take place, there would be a large-scale refugee problem. Besides, it will cause death of untold Ukrainians and fellow Slavs, which have many family ties. Across Eastern Europe, the threat of war in Ukraine is evoking long-standing fears. Here too, the crisis in Ukraine is causing huge problems. The Baltic countries are the strongest voices for deterrence and harsh sanctions. In Central Europe, the attitude towards Russia is ambivalent. In the event of a conflict, oil and gas prices as well as prices of essentials will rise, and this is bound to have a cascading effect across Europe and the rest of the world. Russia's annexation of Crimea was definitely violative of the international law and UN Charter, as it forbids intrusion of one country into the territory of another sovereign nation. Besides, the global order has long been buttressed by the norm that countries do not redraw other countries' borders by force of arms. Economic damage to Ukraine, Russia, Europe, and the rest of the world will be colossal in the event of a conflict. Prices of all commodities will surge, as Russia is a big source of gas, oil, as well as metals. Besides, it is the largest exporter of wheat, with Ukraine close behind. Oil is already spiking and may go up to $125 a barrel, affecting economies across the globe. Post-COVID recovery would slow down by an order of magnitude. United States and NATO are unlikely to appease Russia, as it would feel emboldened, and Putin may be tempted to flex his muscles even further. Lessons of the Second World War clearly show the damage and destruction caused by the policy of appeasement of Hitler by Lord Chamberlain by signing of the Munich Agreement of 1938. The effects of crisis on Ukraine would be maximum. Besides huge economic and political setbacks, it is likely to suffer huge military and civilian casualties. Besides, it may lose a lot of territory to Russia, or the country could have even been bifurcated. Further, as many as 1 million or more people would flee to safer places. Its neighbors' economy too would totter. Oil and gas prices would touch the roof, and prices of food grains as well as all commodities would rise astronomically. Besides, it will be saddled with large influx of refugees. Europe too would suffer because of rise in prices of oil and gas and mega influx of refugees. This in turn would have a cascading effect on its economy, and post-COVID recovery would take a longer time. The quality of life of citizens too would be badly impacted. As far as India is concerned, after remaining quiet for over a month, India made 2 statements recently on the Russia-Ukraine tensions, appealing for a diplomatic resolution to the crisis. It has called for a peaceful resolution through sustained diplomatic efforts for long-term peace and stability. And secondly, at the United Nations, India abstained from a procedural vote on whether to discuss the situation. The latter has been seen as somewhat of a tilt towards Moscow. India's greatest concerns are any conflict will impact the whole world, both economically as well as in terms of security. Conflict at this time could complicate the delivery of S-400 system and the possibility of a presidential waiver from the United States. World's attention may get diverted from China to Russia, with implications for Indo-Pacific as well as India-China border. It would bring Russia and China closer and could build a regional bloc of sorts that excludes India. Will lead to an energy crisis in Europe, besides pushing up oil prices. Will also affect 20,000 Indian nations in Ukraine. That is my viewpoint as far as India's state is concerned, and as far as the rest of the issues are concerned. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, sir, for your wonderful thoughts, sir. And in fact, economic worries are really challenging because the world order gets changed after any shift in the economics do happen. And as far as one of the studies of International Grain Council, Ukraine happens to be one of the world's 4 major grain exporters, right? And it is expected to account for almost 1/6 of world's corn import in the next 5 years. And with that kind of direct hit to its production and output could impact the supply to certain foodstuff. And this is the kind of challenge what we are seeing. There's going to be economic fallout of an invasion is wrought with unknowns. So these are the kind of things which we are seeing in case there is an invasion of Russia, which happens. I will now move on to General Asthana. So your viewpoints, your thought process, how you look at it, what are the economic damages to the Ukraine? And you have done a lot of work, and there's a lot of thought process, which is, you're carrying it forward. I'll request you if you can share your thoughts, sir. General Asthana, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, IOED, Excellencies, co-panelists, esteemed co-panelists. A pleasure to learn from all of them and everyone who is listening to this conversation. If we talk of Ukraine, it's not only what is happening between Russia and Ukraine, and therefore I would like to give a strategic overall perspective to this issue. I was in the mid of writing an article to say why Ukraine is the test bed for big power contestation, because it is a big power contestation in which Ukraine happens to be in a situation because of its geographical location and because of that being the last bastion of the eastward expansion of NATO, which Russia cannot compromise with. So therefore, there is an element of big power contestation, and not only Russia, US, as well as the EUs, there are many other countries who are affected. I think entire globe is affected either directly or indirectly. Now a lot has been said. I will not repeat any of those things. I will only say that as far as Russia is concerned, while the expansion carried on towards east and Russia was not in a position to stop it, it was okay and could not be helped. But when it came to Crimea, it came to Black Sea Fleet, and it came to Ukraine, Russia will have to act. And therefore, it has acted. And what best action they can do, short of war, is heavy posturing, which they have done by putting up troops almost in 3 directions from Ukraine. As far as United States is concerned, the stakes are that they were finding that more and more European countries are getting dependent on Russian gas. They were also finding Russia flexing its muscles. They were also finding that within NATO, if Nord Stream 2 goes through, then certainly the dependencies on Russia will increase. They also find that if their arms dealer have a say, and if they have to sell weapons and there are economic requirements, there must be some conflict or some situation or some threat wherein the weapons can be sold. And therefore, Ukraine also falls in place. So therefore, when it comes to the big power contestation, this place certainly assumes importance. Secondly, is the case of when we are talking of Ukraine, a lot has been said, the sentiments have been expressed, others have also evaluated it and evaluated it appropriately. I don't have to add anything. But what I must add is, in 1994, there was a Budapest Memorandum of Security Assurance signed. Now, under this assurance, what had happened was that Ukraine had almost about, I think, 17 odd nuclear weapons at that point of time deployed against NATO. They were assured by Russia, by UK, and by USA that you give it back to Russia, signed NPT, and we will try and we will ensure your security and sovereignty. Now, this was a guarantee given to them from both sides. And today, Ukraine feels betrayed, because you all must understand one basic calculation. If Ukraine was a nuclear country with 17 nukes or 17 nuclear weapons, the situation would have been entirely different than what we are reading. But it did not happen. So Ukraine feels betrayed, that it has been betrayed by everybody else. You take the case of now United States and NATO. NATO can sideline the issue by saying that Ukraine is not yet a member of NATO. So therefore, we have no obligation to put boots on ground in Ukraine. And therefore, all they will do is goodwill, capacity building, helping them, training them, etc., etc. But when it comes to the fight, Ukraine will have to fight its own battle. That's the message which the world community is giving. Now, when I talk of world community, the European Union also comes into play. Now, in European Union, also the opinion stands divided. President Biden says that if Russia crosses the border, Nord Stream 2 is out of the table. And Germany doesn't say so. And Germany doesn't support so. So therefore, the 40% supply of gas to Europe, it's easier said than done that USA will be able to replace that. I don't think so. So therefore, and Europeans know it, that it's not possible. So that's another issue which the Europeans are picking up sides accordingly. And therefore, the best thing which they are doing is that they are trying to strengthen those countries which have already been joined NATO, and perhaps increasing the deployment, because they have another intention which USA is trying to build a narrative to say that if Russia invades, will it stop there or it can expand further? Then you see a Russian concern. Till now, Russia had a buffer zone in terms of Ukraine between Russia and NATO. Russia did not want a direct border with NATO. And because of this logic, they had to do what they have done. The same thing, the same dilemma was posed to China once. If you recall North Korea and South Korea battle. China did not want to have a land border with NATO countries and USA because South Korea was a NATO country. So therefore, they entered the war in Korean Peninsula to maintain that buffer zone. And even they are supporting North Korea for the simple reason, and they did not want a unification of Korea because they don't want a land border with NATO. Same is the case with Russia. They don't want a land border with NATO. So therefore, people who are trying to read that Russia will invade Ukraine, I think there is a strategic error there. Russia is not saying that I will invade Ukraine. That's not the option on the table. They may pose it, but the fact is there are many options. If you analyze, there are 4 options in nutshell. One is they invade Ukraine. They gain nothing out of it. They will lose economically. There will be sanctions. There will be a constant insurgency. It will be a tremendous amount of bloodshed, tremendous amount of economic slowdown, which Russia cannot afford. The second option is try and stoke insurgency and get these two, that is the Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People Republic included, and they, as it is, want to get freedom. So this could be one option. It has its own merits and demerits. And then, as I think Brigadier Ibrahim was trying to propagate, that a buffer zone suits both sides, and therefore some agreement should come out for buffer zone. Now the Normandy talks or format has not delivered. It finished yesterday, and it finished without any decision, because all sides have hardened their stand. As far as Ukraine is concerned, yes, if they are a sovereign country, then they would like to be told that they would like to exercise their options. And in 1994, Russia also signed a Charter of European Security, in which it was clearly given out that all these countries, including Ukraine, can exercise that option, that for their security, whatever kind of alliance they want to choose, they can choose. So Russia did sign it. So therefore, Ukraine is again betrayed from that angle as well. Now, as far as Ukraine is concerned, I think there are many options. Now they feel that they cannot be hostage to Russia anymore. That's their problem. That's one problem. But at the same time, if we talk of others, they are also quite clear that they will not be putting boots on ground and fighting Russia in Ukraine. So considering all this, I think a solution will finally have to come out between Ukraine and Russia alone and nobody else. And perhaps the people of Ukraine will be the biggest driver of this kind of solution if and when it comes out. So that's one part of it. Now coming on to the others. Word was said about India. I have a slightly different opinion on this. Now, as far as India is concerned, we have friendship with every stakeholder who is part or who is not a part of this conflict or this confrontation, as I may put it. So India has no reason as to either do any mediation or show any signs of perhaps trying to reconcile the situation. The reason, and nobody can cry foul on that. Anybody who is saying that why India is neutral should also look at as to when Chinese were doing a unilateral action, everybody was also neutral and did not say anything, including Ukraine. So how can they say today that why should India be neutral? Obviously, they cannot cry foul now when they were quiet at that point of time. That's one part of it. Even USA, the statement which came out was that it should be resolved peacefully. And therefore, a similar statement has been given by India that it should be resolved peacefully without, with the diplomatic efforts, and there should be no war. Now, this is a standard statement which everybody gave. So India is also giving the same statement. As far as we picking up sides, why should we pick up sides when nobody else picked up side, when we are already going on? People are saying that this is the biggest conglomeration of troops. I would like to remind all of them that if you count the number of arsenal and the troops which are confronting in the standoff on India-China border, it is much more than that. The next point which I would like to highlight is China. Now, China is the clear-cut winner and gains maximum advantage out of this confrontation. For the simple reason, firstly, the heat has turned off from China. Secondly, he can now see the resolve between as to how the US will react and how the NATO will react, and appropriately calculate its stakes on Taiwan, because it's almost a similar situation. USA is still following one China policy. USA has also is still living in the strategy of ambiguity as far as Taiwan is concerned. So how they react here will also dictate as to how they are going to react in Taiwan, although Taiwan is a slightly different situation and stakes are also slightly different. So it's not one-to-one comparison, but somehow it will give the resolve of Joe Biden government as to how it's going to behave. Lastly, as far as the big power contestation is concerned, this is going to continue. This is not the end of it. I think the West has done some strategic errors, and because of those errors, they have landed up in a situation, because in the posturing, Russia has done what it does best, that is the troops concentration. Others are doing what they do best, is the threat of sanctions. And between the two, the sanctions have never shown much of effect on Russia. Even if they did not show effect on North Korea, what to talk of Russia? So therefore, this idea of sanctions, I think, has outlived its utility. As far as United Nations is concerned, let's be very clear. United Nations is an organization which can do nothing, repeat nothing, against a P5 member. I have been in United Nations and done several tenures, and I continue to be engaged in a number of UN organizations. Unfortunately, the structure is such that in UNSC, if you are a P5 member, there cannot be any resolution passed against you. And that's a fact of life which we have to accept. So with these words, what I would say, I've given out as to what are the kinds of options which are there on the table. Going back, doing nothing, or de-escalation, doing nothing will be suicidal for Putin's leadership. So something certainly will happen, even if it is a big fillip to a proxy war. Even that may be, but something he will have to do, because just pulling back out of nothing may also be a little difficult situation. So I think the West as well as Ukraine will have to perhaps give him some excuse to at least de-escalate. So both sides, as they say, that even to blink, both sides have to understand as to what excuse they give to the other side to blink. So perhaps I would be waiting for that excuse to be given by both sides as to so that there is a face saver and the situation de-escalates, which we all hope that it should be peace. There should be no war. I don't think any one of us wants war. I think the humanity should prevail. People should live, and it's one earth, as the Excellency mentioned. And I think we should follow that. Thank you very much. Back to Inderjeet.
Thank you, sir. It's really insightful. Actually, you concised everything. You know, the options of war, whether to go for war, what's the challenges, what would be the Russian stand, what's the world order, how the UN is. It's really wonderful. And you put it like such a good story, sir. It was like everything in one go. It's coming as a proper thought process. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, sir. And it's really wonderful to have you always on the panel discussion. It's really very good, sir. I will move on. I will request Rudolf Nikolic to unmute yourself and kindly, say a few words if you're there. Rudolf? In that case, I will request Mr. Mishra ji, Mr. JK Mishra, to unmute yourself. Mr. Mishra? Mr. JK Mishra, you're there from UAE? to share your views, please.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you very fine. Yes,
Okay, okay. Good afternoon, sir. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. Yes, please.
Thanks.
If you can switch on your camera also, that will be really great.
Okay, 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 okay. Sure. Now, fine.
Yes, please. Yeah.
It's okay now, or
yes, yes. Yeah, you can switch on your camera. It will be really wonderful. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Can you see me now?
Your photo is not coming. Image is not coming, but nevertheless, now it's coming. Yes, please.
Right. So, good afternoon. Good afternoon, His Excellency, Mr. Arvind Kumar Sharma and the entire IOD team. In fact, this topic is really a burning topic these days, and I'm in Middle East, and as you know, that Middle East is also become very aggressive area for the entire world zone, if you can say, these days specifically. And if the situation, warlike situation between Russia and Ukraine and USA, if it happens, so then the war, the border instability in Middle East will be there definitely. Now these days, Middle East, parted into two parts. One who is supporting to Russia, and one is supporting to US. So if you talk about Iran, so Iran will never think, and Iran will never allow the USA to come here, or USA make any difference in this area. But this Saudi Arabia and other, even UAE also, they would always support to US. But in any case, war is not a solution. As you say, war is the science of destruction. These days, the entire world is under crisis of already with COVID, and people never wants the war. But all panelists have already explained the consequences of the war situation for the entire world. So I have nothing to say much, but only thank to the IOD team to organize such a wonderful and current affair conferences these days. So thank you so much, and I'm really honored to be part of this conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mishra. Really wonderful to join in from UAE at this time, and it's a really pleasure to listen from you. We will move on to Mr. Giovanni Rossetti from Australia. Mr. Rossetti, if you can unmute yourself and give your comments on the present scenario, the overall situation. How do you look at it from the perspective while you're there in Australia? Mr. Giovanni?
Yes. Hi, how are you? Hi, guys. Yes. Yeah. As I said, I listening to the speakers, and I guess
I'll request if you can unmute your, if you can put your camera on, if that's possible, it will be wonderful. Otherwise, it's fine.
Okay. Yep. No worries. I'll do that.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That will be great. I think, having the face of the name really is always
good.
Yes.
Just in the evening at the moment.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. Good to see you.
Oh, good. Good. Thank you so much. Yeah. So I'd like to say thank you for this opportunity to have a look I guess to give an input from an Australian perspective, and also as an Italo-Italian Australian perspective. So, because my ancestors are Italian, and obviously I've got family in the EU, but I'm also Australian. I'm within this area. We touch the Indian Ocean, so I've got perspective on both sides. I guess my family, in terms of the history, we played a big part in the Normandy wars, and so the Normandy format has been used recently, and I would say that's something that I guess it seems to be working. but then it's slightly escalating. But I do like the idea of the buffer. It's worked in places like Cyprus. It's worked in Korea, so North and South Korea. I think this is the best option. But from my studies and from working with Labor and Liberal leaders, and as you know, with Malcolm Turnbull, so Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, and also working with DOD here, and then the Quad and also with the UK as a Royal Fellow. I would say that obviously war is not a solution. My grandfather behind me, he actually had I've got a photo of him behind me in North Africa back in the Second World War, and they surrendered. So when the British had come and they had surrendered with the Americans, and I think that was the best way. And after they had migrated to Australia, migrated to UK and other parts of the world into America. And I'd say that definitely the buffer sounds okay, but the worry about having a buffer is that what happens, people can't just sort of pick up, leave their homes and then move to another region of the country, because they lose all their assets. This is something you either stay in your village, you wait until, in my village back in Sicily, we had the Germans come, and the locals would open the doors to the Germans so that the German soldiers wouldn't kill the locals. So they'd go into the old farmhouses, they'd leave all the gold, they'd leave all the food on the table, because no one wanted war. And then there's another uncle that was part of the French resistance in the north of Italy, and he had fought with the Germans, and then the Russians, they came to their aid. So the connection there is, and you're right about Russia, because Russia in Europe, from that perspective, they're using a lot of the energy comes from Russia. Why would they go to war with Russia when you said more than 40% of the energy from Europe is being absorbed by this country? So to me, it seems like it is a battle between family, because I've got German heritage, I've got Russian heritage, I've got Italian heritage, Greek heritage. I'm very mixed, but I don't want any conflict anywhere. I've got cousins in America and cousins that fought in World War II in America, and war, and those are the sorts of things we don't want, those tensions. So yeah, it's a hard one. I know I can understand why people are going to the borders, but you would think with the way that the brotherly love of the world and the planet, that one world, one peace, peace, hope, and love and charity, something that we all want, and we this is something that why fight? Even my grandfather, he was a corporal major, and when he was taken as a POW, he even said he never saw the English as an enemy. They respected him like family when he was a POW. They gave him razor blades to shave and things, and good people. And but no one that I've never spoken to a soldier that ever said that they liked war or they wanted war. They only were there to serve their country, to protect the people. And I think it comes down to the people. And I just hope that they can have a peaceful resolution to this. So I know that the president of Russia, and obviously he's been in a few different organizations prior to becoming a president. I just hope that he doesn't rehash some of the old Cold War things, and we've been there before. Why should we repeat this in history? We should be, there should be a resolution, and probably a reformation to ex-countries of that were from Russia, those sorts of things. So, yeah, so that's enough of me. Thanks, guys. Hello?
Thank you very much. It's really wonderful to have your views. It's so nice. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining this late in the evening. It's really a pleasure. I'll request Dr. Merchant, to give his viewpoint on the whole scenario before we close the session. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, His Excellency.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, Mr. Merchant, you're on mute.
Yeah, I was. Yes, first of all, before anything else, my warm respects and greetings to IODED. I have been, of course, associated with General Arvind Sharma ji, his daughter, Dr. Neha Sharma ji. But because of the COVID, we have not been able to meet on one-to-one, face-to-face. But nevertheless, whenever opportunity arises, I try to be part of the IOD's activities. Colonel Inderjeet Singh, to all the excellencies who have given very profound and really positive insights onto how to resolve the current grave crises. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you all of you know, perhaps, that the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which monitors the state of the planet, has in the third straight year said that we are just 100 seconds away from a global catastrophe. 100 seconds. Look at your watch and you will see how much time is 100 seconds. And they have given the reasons. The reasons are the climate emergency, the threat of nuclear war, accidental or deliberate, and there are many other disruptive technologies. So they have. So in this light, if you look at the current world conditions, surely, as His Excellency from Moldova right in the beginning said, I think he made the best statements to put a perspective before us, that if humanity is one people and this planet is our home, then surely all of our destinies are intertwined. Whether we live in India, in a remote village, or whether we live in China or Russia or United States or in Africa, our destinies are intertwined. So obviously, we need to have a more positive approach to addressing the grave problems of humanity rather than exacerbating them and creating more, I would say, situations that threaten our very survival. As a member of the Baha'i community, we always have firmly believed that this is the time when our world can surely establish world peace. In fact, we have several documents that from time to time analyze the state of the world. So when the Soviet Union disintegrated in 1989, 1990, and then there were signs. One of the biggest positive developments that actually could have been translated into a very major foundational principle for world peace was when Secretary of State, Mr. James Barker, he met Mikhail Gorbachev. At that time, the Russian president had told him that, look, now with this breakup of the Soviet Union, there is no reason why Russia and United States should be at war with each other, why we should be pointing our nuclear weapons to each other. And James Barker, he agreed. The only thing that happened is President Gorbachev could not put that in writing. But when he went back, again, the hawks. So frankly speaking, the world is most of the time on a brink, largely because of the military-industrial complex. As some of the distinguished speakers have already pointed out, that the military-industrial complex from time to time needs crises, wars, conflicts, because they are the ones who have to sell their arms. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know the time is limited, but I'm an optimist, and I believe that humanity has the intelligence and the spiritual strength to address the problems in a positive manner. And I'd just like to conclude with these lines. Whatever suffering and turmoil the years immediately ahead may hold, however dark the immediate circumstances, as a member of the Baha'i community, I am firmly convinced that humanity can confront this supreme trial with confidence in its ultimate outcome. Because far from signalizing the end of civilization, the convulsive changes towards which humanity is being ever more rapidly impelled will serve to release the potentialities inherent in the true station of a human being. We are actually spiritual beings who have a material dimension to us. And when we release our spiritual potentialities, then surely the full measure of a human being's destiny on earth and the innate excellence of human reality will become manifest. So this has been a very enlightening deliberation, and I hope this message will go far and wide, much beyond the small number of people who are listening to this. And I'm sure that peace will prevail, and both the people in Ukraine as well as the people in Russia, because there are external forces also at work which tend to, exacerbate a situation like this. There is no reason why NATO should keep expanding on towards the east side, because Russia does not want any war. But then if it feels threatened, then obviously it has no other option but to mobilize its resources. And Russia is today a great nuclear power, despite all the sanctions and various other, I would say, foreign policy actions by different nations to put more pressure on it, should not actually make Russia feel that it is being cornered. It must exercise its sovereignty. And as has already been mentioned, United Nations cannot do anything against a P5, a P1, a permanent member of the Security Council. So obviously, the situation cannot also continue as a stalemate. And the sooner they're able to resolve and bring peace and back to normal situation, the better it will be for the world. Because we have many other major challenges to address that are threatening the very survival of the human race. Once again, thank you very much. With these brief remarks, I stand beholden to all the excellencies and the erudite speakers who have given a brilliant analysis of the situation prevailing in Europe. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your insightful thoughts and the way you brought it out. And we are just running out short of time. I wanted to take a couple of questions, but we like to do that offline. There are some of them being typed. And what we need to do is, just come on to the closing of today's session. Very insightful. Before we close the session, a token of appreciation to all the panelists. I will just share my screen. And so just by the way it is in the computer. So thank you very much, sir, Dr. V.D. Abraham, for joining the session. Please accept the token of appreciation from our side, sir. Going forward, His Excellency Achal Malhotra, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. Really wonderful, really insightful, sir. It was so nice to you have joined us today. Going forward, His Excellency Fiodor, Ambassador of IOED to Moldova. Thank you for your very passionate thoughts which you gave from the and the ground realities you brought it out. Thereafter, sir, Lieutenant General Anil Malik, sir, thank you very much for your thoughts on the different organizations, how they are working. Very insightful. Really, thanks for you. Thank you to join us today. General Asthana, sir, thanks again. It was wonderful to listen to you, the way you brought it out in such a simplistic way and made it so simple, the complete scenario. Thank you very much, sir. And General Saighal, sir, it's wonderful. You got it. Got us the real thoughts on how the overall scenario goes by. Some of the certificates we could type in. We'll be sharing with you on the email. But nevertheless, thank you, Mr. Merchant. Thank you, His Excellency Giovanni. Thank you, Mr. J.K. Mishra, for joining in the session. It was really wonderful. So before we close, I will just take a snap of everyone. I'll request everyone to please say at ease, and please switch on your cameras so that I take a photograph before we, as a memory. Even Mr. Giovanni, if you can switch on the camera, Mr. Mishra, I'll request. Yeah, that will be great. Your smiling face. Wonderful. So thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you. And Godspeed, sir. It's a real pleasure to meet you all. We'll meet again with new thoughts, new think tank visions from each one of you. Thank you very much, sir. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, His Excellency Fiodor. Thank you, Saighal, sir. It was really wonderful to listen to you, sir.
Thank you very much. We're leaving now.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Achal, sir. Wonderful to hear you, sir. You're mute, sir.
What of appreciation of your comparing?
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us, all of us, it was a session from where I had definitely something to learn and share my own views also.
Yes,
And
sir.
I look forward to meeting you again sometime in person now. Hopefully things will improve.
Sure enough, sir. Definitely.
And all the best.
Thank you very much, sir. Bye-bye, sir. Have a great day, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Same to you.
Bye-bye, sir. Bye. Bye.
Bye.